In years to come, many would wonder why Joseph Jackson allowed his sons to sign Motown contracts, and why he himself would sign an occupying agreement without first reading the documents. In litigation against Motown years later, Joseph would explain, I did not read these agreements, nor did my sons read these agreements, because they were presented to us on a take it or leave it basis. Since my sons were just starting out in the entertainment field, we accepted these contracts based on the representations of Ralph Sessler that they were good contracts. Ralph Sessler would disagree in a way that was a bit unsettling. I have no recollection of ever saying to Joseph Jackson or the Jackson 5 that the agreement being offered by Motown was a good agreement. After leaving Ralph Sessler's office, Joseph telephoned Richard Aarons, the man he had hired as his lawyer and the group's unofficial co-manager. Aarons recalled, Joseph called me up and said he had signed with Motown. There wasn't much I could offer at that point. It's easy to understand why Joseph would sign the deal. It was Motown after all. However, there were significant problems with the contract, many of which would cause trouble for the family later down the road. Clause 5, for instance, stated that the Jackson 5 would be unable to record any other label. Katherine Jackson will also sign a similar parental approval agreement on October 17th, 1969. It appears that she did not actually read the agreement, for in it she and Joseph are referred to as the parents of John Porter Jackson, Johnny Jackson, the group's drummer, to whom they were not related. At the time prior to the expiration of 5 years from the expiration or termination of this agreement. It was a standard Motown clause that applied whether an act was signed for 7 years, 5 years, or in the case of the Jackson 5, 1. So Barry Gorey's consensus to Joseph Jackson proved meaningless. The Jackson 5 were still tied up for at least 6 years. Furthermore, the third clause stated that Motown was under no obligation to record the group or promote its music for 5 years, even though this was purportedly a 1 year contract. Some other contractual stipulations that Joseph might have questioned that he read the agreement. Motown would choose all of the songs that the group would record, and the group would record each song until they have been recorded to our Motown's satisfaction. However, Motown still not obligated to release any recording, meaning that just because the song was recorded, it would not necessarily be issued to the public. The group was paid $2.50 per master, which is a completed recording of a song, but in order for the recording to be considered a master, the song had to be released. Otherwise, they were paid nothing. In other words, they could record dozens of songs and see only one issued from that session, and that will be the one from which they'd be paid. As for the rest, well, they would be just a waste of time. It's been written that the Jacksons received a 2.7% royalty rate, based on the wholesale price of the standard Motown royalty of the 1960s. Actually, according to the contract, the boys receive 6% of 90% of the wholesale price, less all taxes and packaging, of any single or album released. It was the same rate as Marvin Gaye and also the Supremes got. Marvin was also a solo artist, did not have to split his percentage, though the Supremes had to divide their 3 years 3 ways, and this amount had to be split 5 ways among the Jackson brothers. In other words, Michael received 1/5 of 6% of 90% of the wholesale price, or a little under 1/2 of a penny for any signal, and $0.0216 about 2 cents per album release based on assumed wholesale price of 0.375 cents a single and $2 an album. Also, as per the terms of the contract, Motown was obligated to pay the cost of arrangements, copying and accompaniment, and all other costs related to each recording session. Either the song was released or not, but these expenses and others would have to be recouped by the company from the royalties generated by sales of the records that were released. This arrangement will lead to many complaints by Motown artists, and it will be a big problem for the Jackson 5. But Joseph never imagined that the group would record so many songs that would not be issued, and they did, perhaps as many as 100. There, it would be virtually impossible for the group to make any money in the ones that were released, because the boys would still have to pay for all the ones that weren't. Also, if Michael or any of his brothers were to leave the group, he will have no right ever to say that he was a member of the Jackson 5 and shall have no further right to use the group name for any purpose whatsoever. Joseph may not have realized it, but this could be a big problem. For instance, when Florence Bella was fired from the Supremes in 1967, she was not able to promote herself as having been a member of the group. Her prose biography for ABC, when she signed to that label as a solo artist in 1968, would say only that she was a member of a popular female singing group. Also, Motown could at any time replace any member of the group with any person the company chose. In other words, if Tio acted up, for instance, he could be bounced from one act to and replaced by someone else selected by Motown and not by Joseph. An even more limited clause, number 16, stated that Motown owns all rights, title, and interest in the names Jackson 5 and Jackson 5. In other words, they may have gone to the company as a Jackson 5, but they sure weren't going to be leaving that way. When the Supremes wanted to leave the label in 1972, they were welcome to go, but they have to change the group's name to something else. They stayed. Thus, on July 26, 1968, a tiny, barely legible handwriting, Michael signed the deal. Michael Joseph Jackson. Michael's signature meant nothing since at 9 years of age, he was a minor. Having him and his brothers sign contracts was only intended to make them feel part of the Motown family. Underneath Michael's signature, Joseph W. Walter Jackson as guardian.